The test is in 4 sections. At the end of the test, you will be given 10 minutes to transfer your answers to an answer sheet. Now turn to Section 1. Section 1. First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 5. Now we shall begin. You should answer the questions as you listen because you will not hear the recording a second time. Listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 5.
Good morning. Your name is Claire Sanders, isn't it?
That's right.
Well, Claire, as we explained in the letter, in this interview I'd like to talk about some of the things that you mentioned in your application form, such as your experience and academic background.
I see.
Now, for your undergraduate degree, you studied geography, right?
That's correct, at the Scottish National University.
SNU is a very prestigious university. Apart from that, were there any other reasons that you chose to study there?
Well, you're correct in suggesting that the main reason I went there was due to the superior quality of the university, but there were 2 other reasons. The first was that it is reasonably far from my home. I wanted to be as independent as possible from my family whilst I was studying, and felt that that was one way of achieving that aim. The other reason was that the university offered an excellent programme of summer work in developing countries, and that's something I was very keen on.
That would be the Livingstone project.
That's right.
I'd like to return to that in a minute. Let me just check the optional courses you took in your 3rd year.
The 2 compulsory courses were methodology in geography and statistical analysis. And I chose infrastructure, development issues and geology in addition to those.
I see.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 6 to 10. Now listen and answer questions 6 to 10.
You clearly decided to focus more on the human geography side of things.
Yes, I had worked on development projects abroad for 2 summers as part of the Livingstone project. The first project was in India, and the second was in Sierra Leone.
Could you tell me the main aims of the project and how you contributed?
The Indian project was to ensure that a village had adequate supplies of fresh water and adequate sanitation. On that project, my role was to help lay pipes and put together various pieces of equipment. The project in Sierra Leone involved improving the infrastructure. The aim was to create rudimentary roads between villages so that they could receive aid and so that they could get agricultural products, particularly fruit and vegetables, to the capital and larger towns. My job was to help choose the best route for the roads, minimizing any impact on the environment while maximizing efficiency.
How did you find the experiences?
The Indian project was helpful in that it was my first experience abroad, and I got to see how small development projects can really make a difference. However, I found the climate, well, it was extremely hot and humid, and we were doing a lot of physical work, so it was, well, it made you appreciate air conditioning for a start. The second project, well, I enjoyed that a lot more. There was some physical work, but we had some machinery to help us clear paths through vegetation. I really enjoyed being able to put what I had learned into practice. For example, we had to choose a route on a map first of all, according to the contours of hills and valleys. Then we had to explore the ground and check that it was really a suitable route.
And now you've decided to take a master's degree in development studies as a result. Great. Well, I just have a few more questions regarding...
That is the end of section 1. You now have half a minute to check your answers. Now turn to section 2. Section 2. First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 15. Now listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 15.
Welcome to this introductory lecture on the geography of the United Kingdom. The UK, with a total population of over 60 million, consists of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. Great Britain comprises England, Scotland and Wales. England is the largest country of the UK, with some 52 million people. It is mainly a lowland country, with some upland areas in the north and west. The capital is London, with about 7 million people. There are many manufacturing industries, and farming is widespread, but the economy is increasingly service-based, and London is one of the world's leading centres for banking, insurance, and other financial services. High-tech industries have replaced many of the more traditional ones. In Scotland, 5 million people live in an area not much smaller than England. The country boasts vast open spaces and is one of the last areas of unspoiled natural beauty in Europe, featuring mountains, lochs, that is lakes, and glens, that is valleys. Modern industries including oil, electronics and biotechnology, as well as more traditional industries such as fishing and forestry, drive the economy. The largest city is Glasgow, but the capital is Edinburgh. Wales is home to 3 million people, and its geography is characterised by coastline, mountains and lakes. Cardiff is the capital and largest city. Key industries include electronics, auto components, food processing, healthcare and professional services. More Japanese companies have set up shop in Wales than anywhere else in Europe. About 1.6 million people live in Northern Ireland, the capital of which is Belfast, the largest city. Residents enjoy beautiful countryside. Many new hotels are springing up to cater for increasing numbers of tourists and business travellers.
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 16 to 20. Now listen and answer questions 16 to 20.
The climate in the UK is moderate. Summers are fairly cool and winters are quite mild. And despite what many foreigners believe, British weather is not rain and fog. It is actually more comfortable, more varied and more interesting than that. What you can look forward to in the way of rain, sun, temperature, and even daylight depends on where you will be living. Here are some typical figures for London. January is the coldest month at 3 degrees centigrade, whilst July is the hottest at 17 degrees centigrade. Rainfall varies from 56 millimetres in April to 81 millimetres in December. Although the UK is quite small geographically, the climate varies from one area to another. In general, the west is wetter and milder than the east, and northern areas are noticeably cooler than southern ones. For example, compare the following temperatures with the London figures. Edinburgh, 14 degrees centigrade in July, and Manchester, 15 degrees centigrade in the same month. Edinburgh, 4 degrees centigrade in January, and Manchester, 5 degrees centigrade in the same month. Parts of Scotland usually get snow in winter, whereas you might live in London for several years without seeing a significant snowfall. International students who are used to tropical or equatorial climates are often intrigued by the sheer variety of the weather in the UK. Weather in the early spring tends to be especially changeable. You could be treated to rain, snow, thunder and lightning, hail and glorious spring sunshine, all in the course of a single day.
That is the end of section 2. You now have half a minute to check your answers. Now turn to section 3. Section 3. First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 24. Now listen carefully and answer questions 21 to 24.
Hi, Emily. What did you think of that lecture?
A bit hard to follow, but I have some good lecture listening note-taking strategies which really help, so I can review the lecturer's message later.
Lecture listening note-taking strategies? Review it later? That sounds interesting. I must admit, I struggle a bit to take down the gist of what I hear. Look at my notes.
Well, I can see a basic problem immediately. You're writing full words, such as century, when all you need is a C. And don't write increase, just draw an up arrow. And why write thousand when a TH will do?
I see. Just use symbols. That's not a bad idea at all.
It's the most basic strategy, allowing you to record information at a faster pace. These lecturers can talk faster than others too, so you don't want to waste any time. But you need to be very familiar with your set of symbols.
Why?
Because you'll have to look at these notes days, weeks, or even months afterwards when you begin writing your essay. So you'll need to be able to interpret them at a later stage.
I think I can do this, even by looking at your notes. Imed must mean immediately.
But regarding the lecture as a whole, I knew the professor would be giving a set of specific recommendations and comparing two alternative approaches, so I formatted my page in advance, adding the features consistent with the nature of what I was going to hear.
I think I need an example of what you mean.
Well, look at my page. Before the lecture, I drew large headings saying recommendations. You should always draw these, and I draw a table saying Approach 1 and Approach 2. At the end, I drew a flowchart, as obviously the final recommendation would be a step-by-step approach. Then I was prepared in advance to simply fill in the spaces.
Wow! Now that's clever.
Before you hear the rest of the discussion, you have some time to look at questions 25 to 30. Now listen and answer questions 25 to 30.
Your advice about note-taking sounds great, but I still have one question, Emily. How are you able to design your page in advance? I mean, how can you predict the nature of the talk and know which design is likely to work best?
It's rather obvious when you think about it. What's your next lecture about?
Legal studies.
Well, that suggests to me that you'll need a flowchart, since the judicial system has a very logical, do this first, do that second approach, which must be followed in that order. You know, all the processes that happen in the courtroom and the procedures that must take place to ensure complete legality.
Sure, that's the way law is, very linear and orderly. But what about culture studies? That's just a mass of comparisons of different cultures.
Which tells you that you'll need a table where, in tabular form, you can efficiently write down information.
But often the lecture's not that simple. The professor throws in a really complex mix of ideas.
Then use a spider graph, like the web a spider makes, where there's a central idea around which you attach all the associated thoughts and ideas and impressions.
I see. I think I understand. And that would be very quick too, very efficient. I like that. But what about management theory? How would you approach that?
The same as with culture studies. I'd use a network, which is basically the same as a spider graph, linking thoughts, although this time there are directions involved. It is this element that makes it different, the fact that the thoughts go one way and not the other.
Okay, has directions. It sounds logical. And what about the other subjects, such as political science? There's no predictable order to that.
Well, for that I'd just put my notes in a line, that is, in linear or straight line fashion, and these notes would use symbols, of course, to save time.
Okay, that just leaves mass media.
For that, I wouldn't have any special design at all. As you say, sometimes it's impossible to predict in what way lecturers will present their information, in which case the best you can do is pre-write headings, but not specific, just general, as in Main 1, Main 2, Sub 1, 2 and 3, and so on.
Okay.
But always be prepared to adapt to the nature of the talk, using any one of the other methods if it becomes appropriate at the time.
That is the end of section 3. You now have half a minute to check your answers. Now turn to section 4. Section 4. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40. Now listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 40.
When considering the smallest unit of matter, the atom, most people know of electrons, protons and neutrons, but almost none know of another particle, even though they are constantly emitted from the sun in the trillions, with 100 to 200 billion of them regularly passing through your body every second. To repeat, that's not thousands, not millions, but billions every second. You don't feel them because they are small. In fact, so tiny that we can barely detect their presence at all. These mysterious particles are called neutrinos. Despite such an abundance, detecting them is a huge undertaking, and there are many reasons for this. Firstly, the neutrino itself is so small that you need to eliminate absolutely all other particles around. To do this, you need what is called a clean room, one that has an extremely low level of dust, microbes, floating particles, or chemical vapors. You probably don't know it, but the air around you right now has almost 40 million particles per cubic meter. In contrast, the cleanest of clean rooms has less than 10. The second problem is that you also need an environment with absolutely no background radiation. At the surface of the Earth, such radiation is all around, from the sun and sky, and from TVs and communication devices. The only way to screen out all that is to go underground, and I mean deep underground. For example, the Sudbury Neutrino Observatory in Canada uses an old nickel mine, one of the deepest in the world, and puts the observatory in its lowest tunnel, more than 2 kilometers below the surface. At such depths, stray radiation is sufficiently screened out to allow neutrinos only to pass by. The final problem is that you need an elaborate detection system, and this apparatus is huge, and its installation in this deep underground cavity presents quite a headache. Holding such a weighty construction safe and secure requires complex engineering work, such as rock bolting and support structuring. This obviously requires great care and takes a lot of effort. So I've told you about the difficulty in detecting neutrinos. They are tiny, virtually weightless, have no electric charge, and hardly interact with anything at all. Yet we can detect them, and to see how, let's consider the Sudbury installation once again. The detector there consists of a spherical container filled with heavy water. This rests inside another vessel filled with normal water, which helps support the weight of the inner sphere, as well as providing further shielding from any stray radiation. At the edge of this inner sphere are about 10,000 electronic detectors. These are extremely sensitive, able to multiply 100 million times any electric current which occurs. So, as the neutrinos pass through this sphere of water, there is a very, very, very small chance that one of them may hit a water molecule. To increase the likelihood of this, 2 strategies are used. 1. The larger the sphere of water, the better, and the Sudbury tank holds not 10 tons, not 100 tons, but 1,000 tons. 2. The water is special, consisting as it does of heavier molecules. So what happens is this. If the neutrino hits the water molecule, the neutrino is absorbed, but the molecule itself splits apart, producing a tiny electric current. It is this which is detected and analysed, giving key information about the neutrino. The final question is, why do we care about these elusive particles? Well, just think. They can pass right through the core of our sun at the speed of light without being affected or losing strength. No other form of radiation can do that, meaning that the knowledge we get about neutrinos can help us to control them. With this ability, we can probe the center of our Earth, the inner layers of our sun, and the outer limits of our solar system. And that makes it all worth the effort.
That is the end of section 4. You now have half a minute to check your answers.